So everyone, I'm Neil Boyle. I'm a research fellow in the School of Psychology. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the work I did while on placement in the council, working with policy teams to support the delivery of the Leeds Food Strategy. The Leeds Food Strategy is an ambitious future vision for how food in the city should be produced, consumed and disposed of. The aim of my secondment within the council was to support evidence-based policy activities related to the delivery of the aims and the priorities identified in the Leeds Food Strategy. I was very kindly housed within what was the Sustainable Energy and Air Quality team, now the Climate Energy and Green Spaces team. I don't think it's changed since yesterday, probably. I think it's... I was primarily working around the food mission of sustainability and resilience. Leeds was one of the forerunners to declare a climate emergency and has ambitious plans to achieve net zero carbon emissions as quickly as possible. This is reflected in the food strategy. A lot of my work, like I said, has been within the food mission of sustainability and resilience. One of the objectives was to raise awareness of how we can eat nutritious foods that are good for the planet. One way we can do this is by promoting low-carbon diets. Low-carbon diets are those diets which have a higher proportion of low energy-intensive foods across the life cycle. And there's good reason why we may want to promote low-carbon diets. Not only do they have lower impacts on the environment, they tend to be healthier, being comprised of mainly fruits and vegetables, beans, pulses, as well as lower-impact meats. One of the barriers to the uptake of lower carbon diets is poor consumer understanding of and knowledge of the impacts of the foods in which they eat. One way we can try and redress this is the use of carbon labels. That's labels on foods which indicate the impact of the foods used at the point of purchase to inform consumers of the impacts of the choices they're making. Indeed, this is mentioned within the food strategy. One of the actions is to introduce some form of carbon labelling to highlight the contribution of different food items on global warming. And this is a large portion of the work I've been doing while working with the council teams. Firstly, to inform policy in this area, I undertook a rapid evidence synthesis review of the current evidence of the efficacy and the design of carbon labels used in food. This included a summary of the types of labels that have been used and the metrics behind these labels, but also the pros and cons of the different types of labels and what kind of context these labels have been used in. I also provided a summary of the existing evidence of the efficacy of these different types of labels. The efficacy in this instance is the preferences of consumers and also evidence of the most effective label in terms of changing consumer behaviour when selecting foods. The majority, if not all of this evidence, is based on hypothetical desk-based research, so asking participants to imagine, making food choices while viewing these labels. So it was also important to summarise the evidence, which is quite limited, on the impact of carbon labels used in real-world settings. The evidence predominantly comes from catering facilities, in workplaces and also schools, which is essential because these are environments which the council may be interested in introducing some kind of carbon label systems. To supplement this work, I've also been undertaking some pilot work in the real world, working with the catering staff at Temple Newsome Cafe to get some insight from the customers into their some of the reasons why they choose certain foods and their interest in the carbon impacts of food. For example, we've been asking customers within the venue about some of the general drivers of the food, the general drivers of why they make food choices, and we can use this information to inform the frame of our interventions. For example, calories were quite low on people's agenda, as well as if the food's organic or not, whereas taste, the amount of waste and the impacts of foods were higher on people's agenda in terms of making food choices. We also asked people directly, what would make them more likely to choose food with a lower carbon footprint, price, if the food was locally produced, and taste were quite high on people's agenda. You'll note that if a carbon label is added, falls a bit lower down in people's priorities. So this informs us that maybe introducing a carbon label in of itself maybe not sufficient, and maybe to support this intervention with some other actions and nudges. We also asked people directly, would they be interested in having this information on the carbon impact of the foods? While there was some ambivalence, the majority of people did express some interest in being shown the labels. And we also started to ask people what type of label would they prefer to see if labels were introduced. The Templeton Cafe is quite busy, there's lots of competing information. So it's maybe not surprising in this context, most people seem to prefer a quite simple symbolic label. Finally, in terms of future policy impacts, we hope to combine this research evidence and some of the pilot work insights to inform some policies and approaches to promoting lower carbon food choices. In the future, some of these successful interventions can be used across other venues in the city to try and reduce try to increase lower carbon food choices. Thank you.